Hello. Welcome to Log On How Leadership with Ben, Lindy, and Beth Napleton. It is so good to see you people out there in regular land. And for those of you who are catching the replay or on the podcast, it's good to be with you also, even if it is not noon on April 7th, 2022. So for those of you who don't know, I'm Beth Napleton, and I am a consultant and an expert in working with leaders in mission-driven organizations to help them reach their goals. And because I am someone who loves thinking about leadership and all of its complexities, I do these lives weekly as a way to learn about the lessons of leaderships from a variety of perspectives. And today I am so lucky to have Ben Lindy on the program with me. Ben and I have known each other for, I believe, 19 years in person, I believe. And I believe we will get into how I first heard of Ben Lindy. I believe it was about 20 years ago.
Yeah.
This month-ish, or maybe next. We're very close. We're certainly in the rounding to 20, either up a little or down a little in that area. So Ben has been not only an incredible teacher and a law student, a public policy. I mean, I guess you have your degrees now. You're not a student anymore. He went to law school. He went to graduate school. And he currently is the president of the Cincinnati Public School Board, which is incredible in his hometown. And by the way, was the founding executive director, right, of Teach for America, Southwest Ohio. Am I getting that right?
I got my water bottle here, with my.
There you go. And it's got the little, it's a little bit worn out for those of you who are listening, which shows you really were in it.
Yeah, that's right.
This water bottle got used. I was hydrating through all those challenges of leadership. Yeah. It's awesome. So Ben, I don't know if you want to share a little bit about your bio or what you're doing now. And then I cannot wait to talk about how we met each other, because it is a fun story. But I know you've had turns out when you've been friends with someone for 20 years, their career journey is actually much more complex than you're able to easily summarize.
Well, no, I'm happy to. And I just want to say it's such a privilege to be here. And for anybody who's listening to this live or in the future, please know that Beth Napleton is one of my educator heroes and one of my favorite people I've worked with, and someone from whom I have learned and continue to learn just an enormous amount of life wisdom and educator wisdom. And so I'm really grateful to be here. I think you hit the important parts. I mean, I was a public school teacher with Teach for America for 3 years. I taught in a traditional district middle school and as part of the KIPP charter school network. I did study law and public policy in graduate school, and I worked for the DC public schools, where I was in charge of teacher hiring. Which is a wonderful place to be. And then what brought me home was this chance to be the first to help get the Teach for America regions in Ohio started. And then I was the founding ED for Teach for America here in Cincinnati in Dayton, Ohio for not quite 9 years. I left that in 2019 to run for and join the school board here in Cincinnati. About 8 weeks after I started was COVID. So it's a couple of years. But grateful to be here.
Nothing like, helping lead a major district through a global pandemic to just really get your orientation started right.
Yeah, right. And never has there been never has there been a bigger disconnect between what people talked about in the campaign and what people actually had to deal with.
Yes.
Than the everything around COVID, I think.
Yes. To be fair, with zero shade on your campaign. Right. It's all right. That's when people are and then in February 2020, we did this. We're all oh my gosh, we were all just so oblivious to what was about to fall. So yes, but it has been, it's funny. I was thinking, we have been friends for roughly 20 years, and I do feel really just right back at you. It's been such a pleasure to be friends and colleagues and learn from you. And I think, I'm going to go with, I think we've got at least 40 more years left. I'm telling my kids I'm gunning to live to 100. So that gives me something roughly 57 more years to go. So if you can hang in there with me, we'll be in the retirement community somewhere, or knowing both of us probably still very active.
That's the question, right? Where do you fall on this? When do you want to, Paige and I are very far apart on this. And I think she's as soon as possible. And I want to have the kind of job that I want to work as long as I can, and people are different, no judgment, it's interesting fault line.
Yes. And sometimes it depends on the day. Sometimes based on the day, I'm if I won the lottery tomorrow, what would I do? But yes, that also is another favorite part of my friendship. Your lovely wife, Paige, you started dating when we worked together in rural North Carolina. Yeah. And I gave you the excellent advice to never date a first-year teacher. This is a terrible idea.
Yeah.
Ben, she's got so much going on. Like, what are you talking about? It's the fall of her first year teaching. And now you're married with 2 beautiful children. So
I'll take almost all of the advice I get from Beth Napleton. Almost all of it.
Well, I was going to say, this is why I am not a dating and life coach, why I am a leadership coach. And it's about what goes on at work.
Yes,
So
that's good.
yes, that is a good one. And of course, although we did not meet when we were on the faculty together at Kip Gaston College Prep, that's, I think, when we really got to know each other pretty well. But your name first came to my attention when I was working at the Teach for America office in admissions. It must have been was it spring of 2002? 2003 maybe?
We're going to talk about better stories than this as we go forward, right? This is not one I'm super proud of, but it is our first interaction.
I love it though, Ben. I love it, and I love it for a lot of reasons. And I cleared telling it with you because sometimes as friends you've got like a long and sordid history, and there are some things that are better left unsaid. But I was working at admissions. I think I actually had already decided that I was going back to the classroom, and I had visited this school in the middle of this peanut field. It's a town of 1,000. And I had already decided that I was going to be leaving New York City, my beloved home, and moving to rural North Carolina to teach. And we were in the middle of letting in the spring deadline, the spring class. And I was friends with the 2 women who like man the admissions phones. And for those of you listening who may be younger, this was how it was back in the day. You didn't email your questions in because that was so impersonal. You would call and talk to someone who literally, Jill and Michaela, still friends with them, on a landline, and they had like their headsets and they take all your questions. And, it was very revolutionary because that year we not only had paper applications, we also had an online application. So it was like really the big time. So this is all to date this. But you really wanted to change your teaching placement. I think it was the subject. You really wanted to be a social studies history teacher, and that wasn't your original placement. And so you were really nice with Jill and Michaela and just said, look, I know we can figure this out. I will go anywhere in the country. I will teach any grade. I really want to teach history and social studies, and I'm sure we can make this happen. So I'm going to call you. I think it was like every day at 3:00, and we're just going to talk and see where we're at and see what we can do to get this. And it was like, who is this guy, Ben Lindy? And sure enough, you went to rural North Carolina, would become a very good friend, would literally teach next door to me. And honestly, like, and Lindy,
I'm at your house.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I have seen a lot of teachers in my day. I mean, at this point, I've probably coached hundreds, if not thousands. Indirectly, I've certainly coached thousands. You were one of the best history teachers I've seen. So you were
nice. Thank you.
You knew though. I mean, like, I don't know what your placement was, but it was like, you knew that would be where your spirit met your drive and determination, and you made it happen.
I think the reason I was saying I want to tell Beth, it's so wonderful actually to hear your memory of this, because it's much more positive than I'm worried I came across. It's good to hear that. I think I had a picture in my head of what I wanted to be doing, and I pushed really, really hard. My hope is, and hearing your version is helpful in affirming that it was calibrated at the right level, so as to be like generative, optimistic, determined, inclusive, and not like pushy, nudgy, annoying, needy, like self-obsessed. So I appreciate that.
Well, and you weren't like, and I need XYZ set of conditions. You're like, I'll go anywhere in the country. Like, that's not, you know what I mean? Like, which was interesting to me, because when I joined Teach for America, I was very set on like, here are the 3 places I will teach, and that's it. And so I saw flexibility in you geographically that I was like, that's fascinating. And little did I know. And I was like, oh, I guess I will see this guy when he is in that new core, and we'll see. And we ended up literally teaching next door to each other, literally teaching the same group of kids, the pride of 2011, near and dear to both of our hearts. And this is how you go back for a long time. And it's such a funny thing to say, but I'm like, you are my favorite person I ever taught a unit on genocide with, which
is that a big group?
I do honestly, I really enjoy teaching about genocide in a weird way, because I think it's one of those moments as a teacher where kids just like see the world as bigger than themselves and understand the part they have to play. But you taught the history component, I taught the ELA component, and we just had a really, really good time. And I think our kids had a really good time, and we're incredibly engaged, and we're learning. So it was the beginning of a beautiful friendship. Lots of planning there as well. So yes.
I mean, if am I allowed to talk about your classroom for a second?
I just have some secret There were some memories better left unsaid.
No. These are all good memories. I think just for people who are listening, one of the most humbling experiences I had as an educator was trying to sub in Napleton's class when she was out today. I can't remember where you were. It was maybe a school director conference or something. It was something. Certainly not like kicking your feet up somewhere. Like
I didn't take sick days, so that was
unusual for her to be out. But her classroom ran almost on its own because I think the kids knew so much about what to do. But like the level of rigor and differentiation that was happening with a packed room full of kids was like, if they hadn't been so well kind of steeped in that classroom already, it would have been super overwhelming. Like you see teachers teach reading a lot of different ways, but it was the first and to date the only time I've seen kids with like a self-discovered spelling list. It's like they're learning to spell words based on books that they had chosen and they were reading. Like 2 pairs of kids were giving each other their self-discovered spelling test assessments. They were then grading them and entering in the information they needed, like all on its own, And as somebody who was really like trying to get better as an educator, I think it was one of many experiences I had with Napleton where I just realized, man, my bar is so much lower than I thought it was. It really was I'll never forget that. And many, 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 many other lessons I think about teaching that I took from you.
It was a really, I just think it was such a special place. And part of why I think both of us went to teach there was we wanted to learn a lot about how to be better teachers. And I think it was such an intense experience. It, was relatively isolated, a very close-knit group of families and students and teachers. And so I really just took so much from there. And I think that, often, here we are like 20 years later, and some of my people I just love the most in the whole world. And I work most closely with, including those kids were amazing. And still are very good friends. I was texting Alasia Hasty the other day. So
that's the bar exam. I saw
the bar exam. Yeah. Exactly. She's in Chicago. So I'm like, now you have no excuse.
Oh, that's so great. That's so great.
She's working for Kim Fox, who's a pretty incredible prosecutor here. To say, I'm not good at the law terms. You know what she is.
Yeah,
but,
that's great. That's great.
It was really great. So yeah, it was a fun moment. But yes, we have a lot of good time. Just I think always anytime you teach the same group of kids, and I think that was just we went to New York together, which that is a story for not the live the field trip where things went a little sideways, but there was a lot about crisis management in there that we really learned on the fly.
Yeah. To be fair, to the extent they went sideways because of a genuine act of nature. Not because there was like any.
It was the craziest thunderstorm I had ever seen, and it came out of nowhere.
Yes,
with 57th graders in Times Square, slightly late to a Broadway show. So yes, it was good. But it's always good to have good people in the trenches with you. So
yes,
it was good. So if you think about your leadership journey, which at the time, we are both big West Wing fans, and I think at the time that like West Wing was like very active and on. If you had been like, Ben will one day be the president of Cincinnati School Board, I'd be like, I believe it because he is the best Josh Lyman in my life. Like this guy, this is the guy. And he has so many ideas about making the world a better place and so much energy. So if you had a book about your leadership journey kind of over your lifetime, what would the title of the chapter be from our time when we were teaching next door to each other, from when we were there?
Yeah, so I appreciated having this question ahead of time because it took me some time to think about this. But I do think the title for that chapter would be Revelations in the Peanut Field. And I think that there's, it's just, I know you've heard me say this before, but for others listening, like it is just impossible to explain how impactful and transformational the year I spent in Gaston was in so many different ways. Has GCP come up a bunch on past calls that you've done?
Yeah, certainly because Sanchez was here, right? Yeah. McKee Moody was on, and she and I met. She was the KIPP Foundation, so yeah.
Yeah. Well, so I did not to rehash too much, but you walk into a room of 7th graders. I know this is now the 3rd year I've taught 7th graders, so I've spent some real time with 12 and 13-year-olds.
It's a very special age, and in the K-12 continuum. Yeah.
And to walk into a room where people are excited to get the test prep book to study for the PSATs because as a 12-year-old, they've tested in the 95th percentile on the state standardized test. And it's not a kid or two, it's like 2/3 of the room. And to A, for that to happen, B, for the kids to talk about how, yeah, and that's because we're part of a civil rights and social justice movement trying to make the education system in our country what it should be. From a 12-year-old, like, you just can't unsee some of those things. And I'll tell you, 20 years later, I still can't, and I think whenever I get into a hard space about anything with the school board or with my career or anything, I have a lifelong source of inspiration, motivation, and like butt kicking, like from the time that I was there. So like, revelation may speak in maybe a biblical register, but for me, it's a 100% appropriate use of that term, and so I think so many lessons about what's possible, so many lessons about like what it takes from you as a person to make those kinds of things, where it's really not enough to be good at something. Like you have to be good at something and you have to be a good person. Kids only work that hard when they believe in you, and they only believe in you when they believe you love them. And that's not an easy thing for somebody, at least for me at the time, to get my head around. And so it wasn't just what's possible, it's like what that requires of adults vis-a-vis kids and our belief in each other to unlock any of those things. And then I met my wife, literally in that building. Like she came to a Teach for America community dinner, like Eddie Wilson said, "Hey, Lindy, I think there's free food in your classroom." We walked down the hallway, and was quite struck by this person whose name I didn't know, and had to get her name later on from somebody else because I was too embarrassed to talk to her. But like that all those things happened that year with you and in that peanut field. So that's the chapter.
It's a pretty good chapter in the book too. I mean, I think that it's interesting. I think what you said, it's so true about like showing you what's possible and remembering that. Yeah. And it was interesting because I think for me, part of my motivation in starting a school was like, how can I make all the classrooms like they were there? How do I take this into my hometown of Chicago? And like, spoiler alert, it's super hard, right? And there's like a million.
Why I wanted to Teach for America in Cincinnati, or why I wanted to be a school board member. Like, because and yes, super hard, but also not impossible.
Yes. And what's really cool, and what has come up a few times that I do think is really cool, that is like the ultimate kind of continuation, because we were there when that was the school's, I think maybe the year before the first 8th grade class had graduated. The high school was still growing. It was very much a, just growing school system. And, now an alum, Shauna Mayo from the Pride of 2012, is the principal, right? And that is the full circle, right? When you talk about retirement, like that's what I want to do is work myself out of a job, right? It's like, I'm like, it's you guys now. We've fixed this. That again, spoiler alert, not coming anytime soon. So I'm probably more in your retirement camp than Paige's, unfortunately. But I would like to solve these social problems a little sooner. That would be really great. So Revelations from the Peanut Field. I like it. And it has a biblical element, and there was a whole lot of Bible going on there. So, the lines were sometimes a little blurry.
Yeah. Didn't you tell me once that Alasia said I was the first Jewish person she met?
Oh, I could have, and it sounds right.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Awesome. So thinking about, is there anything, I think one thing that's been super interesting to me in talking to people, especially who I met at a time when certainly I think we both were, leaders, emerging leaders, younger leaders, but, very opinionated, action-oriented, a lot of responsibility for a relatively young stage in your career. And now here we are, 20 years later. Is there anything that kind of used to work for you in leadership that doesn't quite work anymore, that you really had to grow and adapt to change? It maybe served you before, but it just doesn't serve you as much anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think this falls into two camps for me. There's some stuff that's like what I could pull off when I was 25 or 26 and had no children, and wasn't married. And like
maybe bounce back a little sooner on a few hours of sleep than.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I think things that work for a year or two or three after 15, like I think there's for me at least, I think to be able to stay in this for the long haul, it's not about a different set of expectations, but what are the conditions that need to be in place for that to work? That's like a lesson about me, or just things changing over time. I think maybe the more interesting one is I think I have learned that there is a ceiling on what I can accomplish when I do things by myself. No matter how organized I am, no matter how hard I work, no matter how good my plan is, there's a limit. And you see all kinds of examples of this in politics, but also in some of the Teach for America stuff and in that region, both external stuff and internal stuff. Like the things, some of the biggest things I've been able to do so far that I'm the proudest of have been things when there was a group of people who co-owned something, and everybody brought something different, and all of us wanted to see this happen. And that's a different frame, I think, than maybe where I was when we met.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot. Kunjan was actually on last February, so a few months ago, and she talked a lot about leading large systems, right, and catalyzing people around the problem, investing them in this, and a lot of this, I've just been thinking a lot since then about, I think it's a Kenyan proverb, right? If you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. Right?
Yeah.
And I think that really resonates.
Yeah. I remember hearing that for the first time and being like, "Well, that's not, I think it's super smart."
Who doesn't want to go fast? Come on, let's go.
That's learned the hard way, I think. Yeah.
We're learning a few things with these gray hairs, coming some wisdom and perspective, right? So it's interesting, and I think that's also interesting because leadership is an evolution. I think sometimes when I work with people, they're like, at this point where it's like the old stuff's not working and they're a little frustrated and they're like, feel like what's wrong with me? Or it's like, this is a journey and we're evolving and we're learning and adapting. And particularly the last few years, like the world has changed around us. Right. And so, how do we continue to evolve in this way? Tell me about a time. Oh, go ahead.
Well, no, I just love that the old times when you feel like the old stuff's not working.
Yeah.
That resonates and makes me think of very specific moments on things. And I think that's great.
Yeah. It sometimes feels like you're banging your head against a wall, just in case if you feel like you're banging your head against the wall, that's probably a sign the old stuff isn't working. And then it's not about, right, like, what do I not bring, or what's this? It's about, right, like, how do I evolve and how do I adapt and how do I, take the cumulative lessons of my past and then kind of think about them moving forward as well. So true.
Yeah.
How about a time you've learned a leadership lesson in kind of a like profound smack you in the face kind of way? Like, I think sometimes we learn very quietly and it whispers over time. And sometimes there's just a moment that's like, well, I just learned that lesson loud and clear, and this is really impactful.
Yeah, I think the clearest example of this for me is when I am needing to do something that is hard, and you can define hard in lots of different ways. It's something to be like, I've got to do something interpersonally, professionally, that the other person is really not going to like, or there are going to be usually some variation of a bunch of people are going to be really upset with me, or and there are other variations on that. I'm happy to give some examples, but I remember learning that if I can really feel and believe that I'm doing the right thing, like the morally right thing, it provides a kind of clarity and calming for me that is 100% sufficient to get through all the hard stuff. And they're like minor. Are examples helpful? Or am I talking?
Yeah, totally, absolutely.
So I'll give you a minor example and a bigger example. Like a minor one, like needing to give someone very clear feedback about performance that is not meeting expectations and changes that need to happen. Otherwise, there's going to be either a separation from an organization or an improvement plan, or some next step of consequence will happen next, right? That was a hard thing for me to learn how to do, and I avoided it for a long time. And I think one of the things that was really helpful in how to like frame that in this way of like, is there like a more right thing to do is partly like what you owe to the rest of the organization, but also like for this person, like they deserve honesty about where they are. And by withholding that information from them, like you're really getting in the way of helping them grow and develop in their career.
You are not being truthful with them when you are not being clear and
we're
saying the thing that you just needs to be said.
Yeah, I would say both truthful and that like that like you owe this person the opportunity to get better at this. And so that was helpful in that context. I think another one's more about politics. Is like we talked about this over the years, but like my first campaign, both my campaigns for election, I lost the first one, I won the second one, but the first time I ran got pretty gross and pretty ugly. This was in the context of a Democratic primary for a state rep seat, after like a particular fundraising deadline where it was clear that I was actually raising a ton of money and was going to be a very competitive candidate, there was somebody else running who was pretty much the party favorite for the position, and with whom I'd like to think I have a pretty good relationship now. So if she's listening, I think we've managed to move beyond this, at least from my perspective, in a very positive way. But I hope she'll tell me if she sees that differently. The attacks that came against me in that campaign were about this research paper I'd published in the Yale Law Journal when I was in law school. And it felt like it was out of a political drama,
I feel like I just saw this on HBO Max's The South Side.
they paid for somebody paid for some opposition research on me and learned some things I didn't know. Which was that my Yale Law Journal piece had been cited by the governor of New Mexico in an amicus brief, making a series of anti-organized labor arguments. And he used that to peg me as he's not really a Democrat. He supports all these charter schools. He supports getting rid of unions. You can't trust this guy. And so there was this big meeting, where all the local officials of the Democratic Party were meeting basically to whether or not to pass a censure resolution for me and take away all these things you really need to run a campaign, like access to the voter database, like it was like, should we kick this person out of the Democratic Party? That's not quite right, but it's certainly what it felt like. Like trying to figure out, what do I do? All these people who stand for all these causes that I really believe in, are telling me that like I'm an interloper and shouldn't be trusted and shouldn't be like, and I think in threading a path and figuring out a way to get through that felt meaningful, like the key was this thing was like a way to see that as friends, like if you want to talk about the substance of various policies, I would love to have that conversation. But if this is going to be a conversation about what you can and can't publish because it's empirically true when you do the research, I feel pretty good about what side of the line I'm on there. And whatever happens next, like I'm on the right side of this issue. And that was helpful for me in working through that.
Yeah, that's really, I had never heard. I mean, I knew it got ugly, but I didn't know the details of that. And I imagine that must have been very painful. Like just thinking about how, like, I just think it's an important part of your identity, right?
Yeah. I mean, it got picked up in the Washington Post by one of their online bloggers, writing about like, he had some not very nice things to say about our local party. But it was, it was wild. Learned a lot.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting now because here we are in a time where, I mean, you and I have both been like, I'm not a huge sports person, but I do follow politics like my sports. Like I'm always like the State of the Union's on, like clear the decks, right? Like, let's watch this. And I think that, a place that people are watching now, right, in this kind of like, political, I don't know if it's our school board elections, right? I mean, like I was just reading an article about the early school board elections in Wisconsin and what does that tell us about the direction the country's headed in? And I think it's interesting because if you had said that, I would think even 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I feel like I would have been like, really? Like, that seems like a stretch to me. Did you need something? And now I'm like, oh, absolutely. There's like, that's where so much of like the pandemic response is coming in, the critical race theory. Like, what do we teach our kids? What do we value? Like, I feel like it's all, you're in the right place at the right time, or maybe you're at a very interesting moment in this time. Like, I don't know. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's complicated because I think some of those dynamics are different given our particular local context where we're
Yeah.
so blue in the city that we don't get some of that stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. This is
it's not that it's zero, like, but we even in Ohio just this week, one of the Republican state reps introduced like a Ohio version of a "Don't Say Gay" bill that also makes it illegal to teach the 1619 Project. Like, I mean, like this stuff is real, you know.
Yeah.
And here,
Yeah.
it's not quite as nasty as in some of the suburbs.
Yeah.
But at a state level, it's absolutely real.
Yeah. And I don't know if I've ever told you this, but last summer I took a road trip with my kids. We went to upstate New York and we drove through a lot of Ohio. And it was that geeky political moment where I was like, Cuyahoga County, like this is always where it comes down to. Like,
there's something blue on election night, you know? Yeah.
Right. I'm like, why do I know Ashtabula?
Ashtabula. No problem.
Because I watched Wolf Blitzer like break it down. I can't always stay up to do the West Coast version of, there's some of that, but Ohio is always a bellwether. So I'm glad you're there and I'm glad you're with that. So tell me a little bit, let's talk a little bit before we kind of move into like leading from change from a variety of perspectives. Actually, let's go there for a second, because I do think that the other interesting thing, and the reason I wanted to tell the story at the beginning about when you were a core member and you were like, I want this history teacher, right? Like this is what I want to do, is that when we really got to know each other in 2003, you were all about, I want to teach for America in Cincinnati. And this is my hometown, my home area. The need is so there. And I feel like you were like talking about it all the time. And at the time there was a lot of growth in Teach for America, but to my understanding, it wasn't really on the radar. And all of a sudden, like 5 years later, it was like, I'm moving back to Ohio and becoming the founding executive director. And I was like, oh my gosh, Ben, Lindy, this is now twice this has happened, where you've been like, no, this is what should happen. And it happens.
you see the beginning of those stories and the end. And there's like
what is
of this that happens in the middle.
That's what I want to know. What happens in the middle? I'm like ready to manifest the things I want to happen in the world. And I feel like, So, like,
so should we pick the Cincinnati one? I mean, I think maybe the way I'll offer to do this, and I'm open to whatever, is like a quick trip through a little bit of the chronology, but quickly, and then try to pull out some things from that, like I've learned about myself over time. The thing I'm nervous about in telling the story is I don't want this to be about how great I am at these things, because I think we're talking about the things that have come together. There's also
I mean, like you were talking earlier, it's a coalition, it's a group, it's an idea. But what I think is interesting is, what is your vantage point as an individual in that? Because we all can identify through the lens of like, we are only one person. We see the world through our own lens, even though I know there were a lot of, and also not just a lot of people, but a lot of factors and timing. And, I mean, there's like just a million dynamics to some of these pieces.
Yeah. I mean, so in terms of like quick chronology, like I think I got more serious. It all comes back to Gaston, Napleton. This had been a kind of a loose fantasy for a long time, probably since you and I were first meeting. I got more serious about it the summer of 2009. I can tell you the exact moment that it happened, because it was when I came back to Gaston.
I was going to say, was it the Pride of 2009's graduation or commencement? Yes.
It was another like transfer, because I've
never gone off camera for this, but right over here, I don't know. I think you're probably in this picture, right? From Tolteca somewhere. I don't know. I'm bad at holding up.
Will you send me this picture?
Yeah, totally.
Is that from Tolteca?
It's from Tolteca. And it's got like Brown, Medema, Kristen Russell. It's got all the, both Burnham. So,
I mean, that's literally the moment I was thinking of. And I didn't realize that you had a photograph of it.
It was over this mysterious white dip in chips.
Yes, right? I'm sure that's exactly right. Yeah. And so it's like I had got myself convinced the best way to make a difference in Cincinnati was to go become a lawyer, go practice as a lawyer for a while. And then maybe once I'd done that for a while, try to find some way to get involved in politics in Cincinnati. And I was in law school. That was the plan. I was home for the summer, working at a law firm downtown, trying to figure out how I could make that work happen. And I was back at that high school graduation. It's the first group to come through Gaston all the way through. I remember hearing Tammy Sutton say, we're not here today to celebrate all these incredible young people who've graduated high school and gone on to a 4-year college of their choice. We're here to imagine a day where that's no longer something special. And I remember being so full of I want to feel like this every day. I don't know what it is, but like, it's not the other stuff I'm doing. Then, was trying to figure out what's that mean for where because I like, folks listening, Napleton taught in the classroom for a long, long time, was a school leader for a long, long time. I have some strengths in the classroom. It's not, I can't do what she did, and I can't do what Sutton and Dolan did, and I was trying, what's my place in all this? And I realized that not everybody by any stretch, but like so many of the people that I admired and learned from had been through Teach for America. Could we get that in Cincinnati? And it was at Tolteca that I was thinking about this. So I was excited about the picture. Anyway, so I became very focused and I'll use the word obsessed about this at that point, and proceeded to just call and take meetings with anybody that would take a meeting with me. Some of those were TFA people. Some of those were local foundations. I met with the superintendent in Cincinnati. I don't think she knew I didn't work for Teach for America when she agreed to take a meeting with me. I certainly had no authorization from Teach for America. And I just sort of learned as much as I could. And I learned a lot from TFA about like, oh, here's what we think about when we open new regions. And I was like, okay, well, let's look at Cincinnati and do those things fit? Where don't they fit? What would it take to make them fit? Who can I meet with to help me make those things fit? And just kept kind of as a hobby, like working on this for a couple of years. And then eventually got offered a job, like to come work on the new site team and continue doing that. But then while, on staff. But I think if I, and then another year or two of trying to actually raise money and get commitments from foundations, actually districts to sign contracts with TFA. TFA had already done a bunch of work in Columbus to get the state law set up in such a way that core members could get a license in Ohio. Yeah. A lot of stuff. But to zoom out from that, and like I think things that have been important to me is being a learner. I didn't know any of this stuff. I didn't know anything about how to raise money or what it took. Licensure, but I think I value and enjoy talking to people, figuring out who knows who and who could teach me what, and read and I think that act of trying to just learn what it would take for something to be true is something that I really love doing. And so, I think that plus like a really healthy dose of perseverance. And I think I have a weird thing, Napleton, about some of this is Gaston too, but like if somebody says something is impossible or can't be done, and you have an opportunity.
You're like, well, watch this. Yeah.
It's like before you take the kids into the restaurant on the field trip, like what's everybody say about middle school kids? What's everybody say? And what are they going to be saying when we leave? And this is our opportunity to show everybody else they should have higher expectations for things. I think there's a lot of that's important.
That is amazing. And also I feel like now I've dusted it off. We've got the picture here. There is Ben. I'm terrible at this. There you are, right? No, that's Felger. Okay, this is all right. There you are.
Nice.
Back row. We're here. So there's quite a crew. I'm trying to figure out how to center it. That is not my skill set. But yes, I will send you this. In fact, I believe I have a few frames of these because the quote I made them shortly after graduation. Which is like now, over 10 years ago. But the quote is one of my favorites. It always makes me think of Gaston, is that Margaret Mead quote about never doubt a small group of thoughtful people can change the world. Because indeed is the only thing that ever has. So that seems very appropriate. And now I know the wheels were spinning that night for Teach for America Southwest Ohio, which is pretty cool. So, you've done work from so many interesting perspectives, right? I think like classroom and you downplay your skills, but you were quite a teacher. And I always have said you wrote the best essential question that I have ever seen. I've been wrestling with it for probably now we're at like 18 years of wrestling with it, right? When we did our unit on the genocide, what's worse? What was the question? What is worse? A man who beats his wife?
Like the husband who abuses his wife, or the neighbor who hears it and doesn't do anything about it.
Yes. I've been chewing on that question for 18 years.
It's a good life lesson.
It is. Yeah. I do feel like I've learned a lot about trauma and generational histories that has now informed it. So now it took me like 15 years, but I'm ready to come back to that for another discussion another time. But, really, you had this perspective in schools, in a traditional school, and then you came to to Kip, then, certainly your work in DC public schools, your graduate school perspective, right? You're now doing some consulting work, and you're an elected official and serving as president of the school board, which is like essentially a full-time job. Like, that is something I've learned through this series, is that is not like a, rubber stamp name on the, letterhead kind of situation. It's really, it seems to be 25 hours a week, right? Meetings, prep, I know open meeting laws. It's a lot of responsibility, which, makes sense. It is a lot of power and responsibility that comes with it.
There's a lot of kids, we've talked about this before, but like, it does not pay anything. It's a lot. And at least in our context, can't be a full-time.
No. It is a side note, interesting conversation on then who does that privilege in running for and representing 100%. People on a school board, right? It's like, right. There's some real ripe equity work there. Yeah. So that's kind of interesting. But like, I think that you have been through all these perspectives, like when you had a room full of 7th graders in front of you, and when you're, at in the meeting room, the fancy, board of a meeting room, you really worked for better schools for kids and for kids through all of that. And so when you think about leading for a change from all those perspectives, what is similar that you feel like it's true no matter where your official seat is or what you're doing, and what may be different? Because I think that, a comment from a 7th grade history teacher is a little different than a comment from the president of the school board. And so I would love to hear a little bit, and our listeners, about where those similarities are in leading for change and where those differences are.
Yeah. That's a great question. I think the stuff that to me has felt true no matter where, are things like having a cause or a vision or a goal or something you're working towards that you really believe in. That goes to that moral clarity point from earlier. Everywhere. There's something about like old school teaching as leadership, like have a plan, plan is a good plan, meets certain criteria, works backwards. Like, I do so much of the personal operating stuff and like the action planning, quarter planning world of things I learned through that kind of school of thought. I think there's stuff that is the same no matter what, that's about learning and improving over time. Like what's your process for getting better?
Yeah.
Because I'm both, like, I think we'll talk about diversity, equity, inclusiveness in a minute, but like certainly in the context of being a white guy, but even separate from that too, like I make mistakes all the time, like, and is there a process to learn and get better from those things? That's felt really consistent. I think the things that have changed, some of the things like I have learned a lot, and I also have lots and lots more to learn, but I've learned a lot about trying to build relationships with people who are different from me, particularly along race, but also like with hierarchy within organizations. And it's just, I feel like a lesson I learned over and over and over again about like how much extra work it takes to make sure that people you work with know you and see you as a human, like, and them as people. And I think that's something I've learned a lot over time, that is a little bit different from how it was. The other thing too is I think like this was true as ED at Teach for America, certainly true I think in school board context, is like as a teacher you could do a lot of things. Like you could be, or I could be working on like getting my students more invested so that like the vibe and the culture and the behavior was better, and I could be like trying to make the reading strategies that I'm using like better, nonfiction texts. And I could like have a more thoughtful approach to homework so that like we are building life skills and we're also like making their lives like manageable and my life manageable. And we could be running and working and improving a lot of those things. And I think like when I was at the better points of my tenure as ED, I was better about like these 3 months. It's these 4 things. And like, stuff's got to get covered, and I got to make sure it's covered, and I got to check in with people to make sure it's get covered. But like for me and what I'm spending my time on, it's got to be this number of most important things. And then that's something that gets.
Well, and I'm guessing that even particularly in your role, right, even with the school, it's like you can only do, I think about it as buckets and energy. And it's like the more buckets you have, the less energy goes to every bucket. And when you want to make traction on something, and I think also, the problems are really thorny and they're challenging. And there's like if it were easy to solve, they would have been solved by now. And so I think that really resonates a lot. I actually just tried a new geeky leader alert here. I'm trying a new planning template from a book I read. And it's like, pick 2 goals a quarter and that's it. And I was like, all right, here are my 2 goals. And it's been, it's been like 4 days, right? I started on Monday, but I'm like, I'm really hitting those 2 goals hard and that feels good. And there's other stuff. I'm like, what about that will come later. There's a certain amount of maintenance. Like I still need to, pay my bills. I still need to pick kids up from school. Like I can't not do those things. And that focus can be really impactful. So, yeah. What about?
I haven't pulled off 2. I was meaning to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
No.
I was just I haven't pulled off 2, but I've been able to get 3 to 5 per 3 months. Has been something helpful for me at least. That's been helpful.
Yes. Well, it's called. The book used to be right here, The 12-Week Year. So that's my newest. I'm experimenting. I'll let you know how it goes. So. And we'll see where I'm at June 30th. I'll let you, the proof will be in the pudding. So, we talked a little bit about equity and kind of mentioned some of these issues. And this is something that we both have cared about for a really long time. And I think that, I know that, the world has begun moving in kind of a faster on that track. And I think that, a lot of, when you're thinking right now at this moment about the diversity, equity, and inclusion work, personally, professionally, kind of in what you do, what are you thinking about? What's on your mind? What actions are you taking? Kind of where are you in that part of your journey at this moment in time?
Yeah, I think this is, I would say, particularly in the last 5 or 6 years, this has been something really, really important to me. And I think one of the things was really helpful around 2017, 2018 was trying to build my own schema for what we're one to be a really strong leader for diversity, equity, and inclusiveness in this country as a straight white male leader. What's a meaningful and discrete and clear set of things that person would be doing that I can then be intentional and proactive about, and then assess how well did I do against, and to try to build it. I wound up on the advice of a mentor, interviewing a series of white guys who were based on the experiences of the people of color working with them, really strong on diversity, equity, inclusiveness as executives. And then trying to hear the things they're saying, hear the strengths that I think I have, work if there be some overlap, and came up with some principles that I think have been helpful. I think the thing, and they range from things needing to have a personal reason to care about diversity, equity, and inclusiveness that is unique and particular to me and my background. And took a while to figure out what that was, and for me, I think it winds up coming from the joint experience of being both a white person and being Jewish, and that there are different things that come with those two, but the interplay between them becomes, for me, a real source of energy around all of this. Anyway, there's a lot more in there, but I think what I wanted to try to pull out was trying to learn from other people who share my identity, some lessons learned, and build a framework for myself has been really helpful. I think the thing I'm trying to figure out now is to what extent does that change or stay the same as a school board member? Are there things that stay the same? Are there things that are different? A lot of it I'm still trying to do. If you're leading an organization or on a board, are you holding the organization accountable for outcomes and looking at equity gaps? By sexual orientation, by income, promotion rates, student academic outcomes, staff retention, like whatever. Other things are different in the seat that I'm in, and in the last couple seats. And so those are things I'm trying to figure out.
I think what I hear in there that's so interesting that I think really works for a lot of people too is like, what does this look like when done well? And if that's blurry, it can be very hard to figure out the path. And unfortunately, I don't think there are like an abundance of straight white men who we look to and think like they really have this down, right? And so how do you look to people, both those who share your identities and those who are different, right? And thinking about how do you study what this looks like? What does it mean? What does allyship mean? What does it mean to be speaking up? What are people who are the leaders of color and the thought leaders around this? What are they saying and thinking about? And then how does that help me think about what I speak up about in these situations? And so, and by these situations in life,
right.
in every venue, right? And so it's been super interesting. Well, let's go to the lightning round. And I would love to start with a book that has meant a lot to you professionally that you would recommend.
Oh man.
Once a reading teacher, always a reading teacher at my heart. I'm like, obviously everyone learns some books. This is great. You can pick many.
It's a short one, but the 5 dysfunctions of a team around how teams work together and clarity, and a couple other Lencioni books. But if I had to pick just one, that's the one I'd pick. I used it with both the campaign teams. I used it with the school board. I used it at Teach for America. I used it as school director. I've used it all over the place.
It's a classic and it works so well. And it's right. It's funny. Eric Sanchez was on last week and he is a huge Lencioni fan. He's always the guy who tips me off when there's a new one. Like, oh, there's a new book out. I'm like,
oh, nice. Good.
But that's a classic. Is there, because there are other resources that help us learn, podcasts and websites and tools and all of that. Is there another resource that's been really impactful for you?
I mean, like what's truly been more impactful than any of those is like trying to get time on the phone with people that I really admire. Like who is the person who is best in the country at this, and will they talk to me for 30 minutes? Or do I know someone who knows that person, and can they ask that person to talk to me for 15 minutes? Those are the things that have really been the breakthroughs. Yeah.
Yes, that is a great. But yes, very true. Very true. I love it. And I've been picturing you meeting with the superintendent of Cincinnati Schools, like as a representative of Teach for America. I
didn't misrepresent myself.
But I know you never would. Your integrity is impeachable, but I just like love this image because it's like, oh yeah, it's,
Yeah.
But I love it. I think you're also really good about, just like saying like, this is what I want to talk to you. And like, what's the harm in asking? Like, there is no, right? Like, what's the worst that happens? I never hear back. I never do this, which I really admire about you. How about some mentors personally who've meant a lot to you? Kind of speaking of this, and if you want, we can couple this with this idea of like mentors from afar who maybe you don't know, but who have helped shape your understanding of leadership.
Yeah. I mean, so quick list, I got to put Caleb Dolan at the top of it, just in terms of inspiration. And we don't talk often, but I think can't keep him off that list. I think Rachel Shankula is somebody who's a transformational influence in my life. And there are examples of things I've learned in working with her from our last, 57 minutes. And then, Kevin Huffman is somebody I look up to a lot. I think has a lot. I learned a lot from. Josh Anderson's the longtime ED of Chicago is somebody I've learned a lot from. List goes on, and I think those are certainly 4.
Yeah, that's awesome. How about mentors from afar? Bruce Springsteen is a big mentor from afar for me. So I learn a lot about leadership from Bruce.
I mean, Aaron Sorkin, like we got to put him on the list, right? I mean, he's got to be on there.
I learned a lot. I would say, like from President Bartlett. I don't know about Aaron Sorkin as a person, but about
That's fair. Okay. How about the artistic inventions of Aaron?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I don't know enough about his life, and
it's fair. Good question. Good questions. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, not to totally put you on the spot here, but who is your favorite West Wing character? I don't know if we've ever discussed this, and this seems really important.
It's easy. No, it's super easy. It's Bartlett. Yeah, like for me anyway. Like I think people divide and go different ways on this, but like I've always been a Bartlett guy.
Yeah, I just think what's hard is there are so many.
Yeah.
Like, but not Josh. I love Josh. CJ. I mean, there's just so much. There's just so much richness.
Yeah, no, and I agree 100% with all that.
I know it's hard. It's like it's hard to pick that. And then what is something that you are like loving in your life right
I am loving like a new engagement with Judaism. Truly, I've had the chance over the last couple of years to be a part of a pretty wonderful fellowship cohort and have learned how to I think engage with Judaism as an adult. Which is something I don't think you can learn when you're 12,
Yeah.
studying for bar mitzvah. And I think it's been, have met some wonderful friends and some wonderful families. And it's intellectually interesting, morally motivating, and is filling my bucket.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. And that can be a whole another episode because that I feel a deep connection to the Jewish people, and in fact have my own challah recipe. So should you need your own, I have one for
conversation Joy Plum and I had about that in the back of your classroom when this was happening in prep for a New York trip. I don't know if I've shared this story with you.
I don't remember this at all. I have no memory of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yes, I've got several challah recipes to have you covered. The regular one and then the special holiday one. So no, that's awesome. And I think so meaningful as an adult, right? Just to think about how we engage. So, well, can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing now? Because of course the school board takes up a lot of time as a full-time job, but also that does not pay the bills. And, you have, I think, been able to bring your expertise and perspective to so many people. So I would love if you would just share a little bit, about what you're up to.
Absolutely. So I am working as an independent consultant, basically on projects with smart, dedicated people trying to make the world a better place in interesting ways. And I think I describe it that way because the projects and people I've worked with are pretty diverse. And they have ranged from I've done a number of projects as a fundraising consultant. So almost 9 years teaching America and 2 political campaigns. I've done a bunch in fundraising in lots of different contexts. Very different organizations, very different parts of the country, but both causes I really believe in. And it's been a lot of fun. I'm currently working on a project with a group in the Louisiana Department of Education, helping school districts in Louisiana put into place a grant program to help transform some of their schools, which is really interesting and fun. I've done some management coaching for new leaders of organizations. That's some of my favorite work that I've done. And so, I think for anybody, ranging from, we have a project that we don't quite have enough hands for to we have this gap in coverage on our team because there is a parental leave or there is an unexpected transition to there's somebody in the fundraising or team leadership space who could use a coach and somebody in their corner. There's all different kinds of things I work on, and Beth has up there how you can find me.
I say if you're in, please, Ben at lindyconsultingllc.com for those listening to the podcast. So BEN at Lindy, LINDY, consultingllc.com is a good way to get in touch with Ben. And if you have enjoyed this and you enjoy these gems on leadership, there are more coming. And so I would send you to my website, bethnapleton.com, BETHNAPLETON.com, /stay in touch. And that will sign you up for our newsletter, which is going to get a big refresh. You're hearing it here first. But I send it just on average 1 to 2 times a week and always has great resources and inspiration. And it's just so easy when I spend time talking with interesting people who have so much to share to kind of be able to share that out for leaders who are in the trenches and working in mission-driven organizations to make sure that they're able to help their people and themselves reach their goal and honestly, ultimately make the world a better place, which I think this is what it is really about. Of course, you can also follow me on social media and see any of that there as well. And just really appreciate everyone who tuned in today, people who are watching the replay and the podcast. And of course, most of all, you, Ben Lindy, Mr. Lindy, not Mr. Lindy in front of kids, Lindy in Tolteca.
Yeah, there you go. That feels good.
Exactly. Always good when you have people who call you by your real, unofficial name. So this was just such a pleasure, and it's always so fun to talk. So I appreciate you taking our conversation to the internet.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right. Take care.